first time, so bear with me. So we have an agenda. I'm going to call the meeting to order. My name is Liz Feidel. I'm part of the Long-Term Finance Planning Committee. With me today, I have Counselor Marty Hawk, also on the committee, and Counselor David Henry, who is joining us as he is just joining us. Just joining. So welcome. So we need to adopt the agenda. Hopefully you have all seen that. I would like to think about getting number 6 and number 7 moved up so we can hear from FSG first, if that's a possibility. Would that work for FSG?
Yeah, and if it's not, Jeff's going to start off on the general obligation bond.
Well, I wanted to hear from you first because
for which one?
I want to move you up on the agenda. If it's,
I don't know who it is we're paying by hour to get them done and out of here.
Yeah, so I want to move you up because I think some of these other things we're going to hear about, some of the things you may tell us may be impacted by what you're going to tell us.
Okay, because most of the things we're going to play a role in on the agenda. So, okay.
Oh, so you'll chime in as needed?
Absolutely, on almost every one of them, yes.
Okay, so you're telling me there may be not a need to move you up?
I think I would suggest that.
Okay, so is that okay with you, Marty?
Right, I really think it should be the bond person first then.
So the bond
Is that what he's
person-
saying? Because Greg's got to stay here through the whole thing anyway.
Okay. So Jeff is asking to be moved up, right?
Which one?
You're asking to be moved up?
I'm asking for number 9 to be moved up because Dennis Otten, who is the bond counsel for our general obligation bonds, is on the call, and I want to be sensitive to his time.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody? You all right? All right. So you want to make a motion, Marty, or? Marty, you want to make a motion?
Oh, they're just,
Oh, we adopt the agenda that way?
yes, just move it.
Okay. So we're going to move along and move number 9 up to the top. And then I guess we'll.
Where, please?
Pardon me?
Where are you putting it?
On the top.
Top being,
Top being right after the adoption of the agenda, right?
or do you want, well, see that, do you want to approve the minutes and then have it follow the approval of the minutes?
So just tell me where to put it. What number is it going to be now?
I would move it to following number 3.
All right, let's move number 9 up following number 3. Is that the general consensus here? All right, so we're going to approve that. So we're going to approve the summary and minutes, right? So we have minutes here to approve from, let me look at the dates here.
We need a voice vote to amend the
Okay, all right.
agenda, please.
All those in favor of moving number 9 up after number 3 on the agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Any opposed? No.
Oh, sorry, any opposed?
There you go. Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, so now we have approval of the summary minutes, one dated April 24th, and yes, 4th. So anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes for April 24th?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Voice vote.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? So that passes, right?
Yes.
All right. So now I think we have number 9 coming up. Is that correct? Am I following the grand scheme of things here today?
Yes, and
All
I think Dennis, Jeff, and I'll kind of tag team on this,
Okay.
and I'll let you, Jeff.
Yes, with Senate Bill 1, we saw some changes in how we do general obligation bonds. Traditionally, the county has done one general obligation bond every year for $3 million that covers a variety of capital expenses. And so that will not be as straightforward of an option this year. And so I think Dennis and I have discussed a couple of different options that may be available to the county. And so I would turn it over to Dennis to kind of walk us through them.
And Dennis, remind me and others, if necessary, who you are.
Yeah, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yes, good morning, committee members. My name's Dennis Otten. I'm a lawyer with the law firm of Bose, McKinney and Evans. I've been working with Jeff and Greg and his team in the county for years now doing this annual general obligation bond issue. And we've done some other projects for the county over the years. But this morning, Jeff had asked me to be here to talk with you about some of the changes from SB1 that impact the process to do general obligation bonds in Indiana now, not just for your county, but for cities, towns, counties, and schools throughout the state.
Okay.
And I'll back up and just tell you about the process that we're accustomed to doing and what the changes now with SB1 in place. If the county wants to continue to do short-term general obligation bonds, what the options are and the differences. Historically, when the county's done a one-year general obligation bond, we were able to get that approved by a resolution of the county commissioners, a bond ordinance by the county council, and an appropriation ordinance by the county council for the appropriation. Pretty straightforward process. And that was because the size of the bonds and the term of the bonds just didn't necessitate any additional requirements under Indiana law. Under the new procedures with SB1, the county is not able to do that type of bond issue. There's a cooling off period that's been put in place under the statute. And what the statute basically says is that if you've issued a general obligation bond before May 21 of this year that has a 2-year maturity or less, then you can't issue another general obligation bond until after a year after that bond expires. And that's for projects that are not controlled projects, and I'll explain that here in a second, or for bond issues that would have a term greater than 5 years. So we've been talking with Jeff and Greg and his team about options to allow the county to continue to be doing what it's done historically, and also be able to do it while complying with Indiana law under the new SB1 provisions. So we know we can't just do a spot one-year general obligation bond like we've done before. So the options are we can authorize a larger bond issue with multiple series that would fund what we call a controlled project, and then issue those bonds each year in series to meet the county's needs to ultimately fully fund the project over a period of time, say 3 or 4 years. Under that process, we'd have 2 additional hearings, and there would be an objecting period, a 30-day objecting period where taxpayers or registered voters could circulate a petition asking what's called a petition remonstrance process to apply. Now that would need to be signed by 500 or more people to trigger that process. So it's a pretty high threshold. We wouldn't expect it to happen, but it's just a procedure that we've not had to do on the prior bond issues. If we went that direction, we could do these procedures this year, get it approved, do a bond issue this year, and then do bond issues next year and the following year without having to go through additional procedures because we would have approved everything this year. So that's sort of option one. I will talk about another option, and I'm not certain whether the county would want to do this. I've talked about it with Jeff and Greg and his team. There's the ability for governments to issue what are called improvement notes. They have a term of not more than 10 years. They can't be issued for more than $2 million, but they're payable just like a general obligation bond, and we're not precluded from doing those under the new statute. The one drawback to those is they need to be used on improvements to buildings and structures. And I know that historically, the county has used some of the GO bond proceeds for funding equipment that may not necessarily qualify. So if we were to pursue that route, we'd want to identify projects that were kind of the building improvements, building structures, as opposed to things like pickup trucks, vehicles, street sweepers. And I'm going to stop there a second and see if you all have any questions. I had provided a timetable. I don't know if that's been circulated to you, but let me take a pause real quick and see if you have questions. And if not, if Greg or Jeff want to interject anything that I may have missed.
So if he pauses for a second, I guess, Dennis, one other option is it not, that the county could do a general obligation bond of up to 6.5 million as a non-controlled project, correct? And we would then, in order to not have a roadblock because of SB1, we could amortize that over 5.5 years. We have to be beyond the 5, correct? And
that's correct, Greg. Yeah, I didn't mention that. That is an option.
Yeah, and so this is something I've done in Hancock County each and every year because, quite frankly, we weren't going to. Our current tax levy right now is 3.0, 3 million. Zero, but what we could do is 6 million in essence. I'm just going to use this over an example, 6 for 6, 6 million over 6 years. We could then use that 6 million. The limit right now is 6.5, but I'm not worrying about the half. And we could use that on any type of project, and we would amortize it over not 5.5 or 6 years. I was just making 6 for 6. And we can do that going forward without many issues. Is that correct, Dennis?
Yeah, because it would be outside the 5-year or less threshold under the new SB1 cooling off statute.
So that's our third and maybe one of the easier options, but something we wanted to chit chat about.
And I would just say that this option 2, the definition of what you can utilize those funds for is a lot more restrictive than what we've traditionally used our general obligation bonds for. It has to be for a specific building, a specific project. And if you look at, historically, we've used these funds from everything from highway truck purchases to police vehicles, which wouldn't qualify under, or at least my reading is it wouldn't necessarily qualify under that. So if that were a route that we would look at, we would have to really seriously take a hard look on over the next year or so, what buildings are we actually doing up to $2 million of improvements? I'm not really aware of any at this point. So that one, in my mind, would probably be the least likely to accomplish replacing the normal $3 million GO bond. I also think that if you went, he said 6 for 6, you could do 3 for 6. So if you wanted to maintain that current level, you could do a $3 million bond paid over 6 years if you'd wish. I mean, the 6 is the maximal.
From the overall schematic design of the tax rate, keep in mind the 6 for 6 would then yield us a savings of $2 million. But because we'll be putting in the new levy, that will, if that gets installed, that will be $3 million. So we will have, so one's going up, one's going down, right? And so that will have some leveling effect. So I kind of liked it not only from a standpoint, Dennis, it gives us maximum flexibility. It also gives us a good strategic impact on the tax rate in total. Remember, we only have 30 pennies here to deal with. So we got to use our pennies wisely. And so, you know, this would help us yield that result.
Marty, do you have anything? What are you thinking?
I'm looking at this and hoping that this is going to be able to be printed out as soon as this meeting's over. This is being recorded, I hope, and we need to just push a button and print it out for all of us to see what's being discussed here, so that we'll have time to review it and think about it. I think it might be difficult to pass a $6 million bond on top of passing a jail bond. I just think we have to look at that. And we have become rather addicted to doing a bond every year. And so we generally are telling our departments not to put anything under their, that what we call the 4 category, so they can have a category to cover some of their equipment and so forth. So this is something that would be of interesting discussion by the entire council. This is certainly not this body's decision, but I appreciate the information. We can study it and be prepared for a decision at such time that we're asked to do that.
Keep in mind, again, we can go 0 to 6. So you can go anywhere, that's $1 million, right? 0. So like, as Jeff pointed out, we could go, but we would want to probably keep it within the 5.5 years for amortization.
Right.
And it doesn't mean it will preclude, it will open the door in the future for whatever we need to do. So it won't close any doors at that point in time. So we wanted to give you the 2 or 3 options as the finance team. And remember, as your independent financial advisor, my role and responsibility is point out all bad, negatives and positives. And I like this positive of doing it as a 3rd option. Dennis actually has great 1 and 2 options. That's not a problem. But this is probably overall maybe a path of that we can do some equalization also.
And as I understand what so far I've been trying to follow, if we tied it to the 3 over 6 years, the tax per the taxpayer will be less for every one of those 6 years? Because are you saying it'd be a $3 million bond, but it wouldn't be paid off? It would be paid off in increments? Or are you saying it'll be an extra $3 million every year?
No, ma'am. It would be what you said at first. So right now we have a $3 million levy. If we took $3 million over 6 years, that's $500,000 a year. So we're going down in our debt service levy. We only have 1 bond. So we're not excessively under debt. So we would really cut that. So that's where I was saying, yes, you can do 3 over 6. It really cut it. 6 over 6 still really cuts it by almost $2 million. And then we have room for the new levy coming from what we need to make up for this year, and it kind of evens out. So we wanted to introduce the concept, and at some point then we need to get on a pathway if you want to do a pathway. If not, we won't discuss it.
So, having not discussed this before, of course, my mind's going on. But what if so you can't do like a $2 million over 4 or something like that? It's got to be the 6 year.
Dennis, you want to respond legally?
Yeah. In this case, it would need to be under the scenario that Greg is mentioning here, it would need to be at least 5 years.
It's
Amortization, payoff. Remember, we send this, any of our GO bonds, we send out to the investing public, 100 people get the information, and we've gotten real good response from your local bank you know, and they've really given us a fabulous interest rate over the last several years. We still believe that even this type of structure, because we preliminarily talked to them, and they said, oh yeah, it wouldn't bother us at all. So I think if you chose this route, our same competitive nature of selling the bond is alive and well.
So, may I?
Yes, please.
First of all, is there any kind of prepayment penalty? Or what if we decided we want to do something other than what was covered in the bond? You know,
So
6
Dennis-
years out, we don't know what's going to be happening here in Monroe County. So I'm wondering, let's say if you've paid down the bond by a certain amount, can you reauthorize it and stretch out another six years? Like if you've paid off $1 million of a $2 million bond, just make that up, and you've paid it down $1 million, can you then re-up it and take out another 6 years, or you can re-up it and take it out for the remaining part of the 6 years, or?
So let me answer, because you and I have done this many, many times, and we've done exactly what you've said. So Dennis, the one question I've got from a legal perspective, if we issue a 5.5 but have a redemption in the 4th year, would that cause us a problem under SB1? Remember, we're coming here because of SB1
Right.
and suggesting these options. Otherwise, we'd do what we always did, okay? And we'd go on that track. Dennis, do you think that would cause a problem with a prepayment?
No, I don't think I would. And it's a fabulous question. And we all, I will say this, are sort of wrapping our heads around and marinating in what is now new SB1 language. But that said, I look at the statute, it refers to a bond issued with a term of 5 years. Not that the bond itself actually has to amortize that full period when you issue it. So, and I think that's deliberate because there are circumstances where arise where a community just may need to pay off its obligation early, whether it's a funding mechanism or they're needing to structure around something else. So that's a long way of saying, Greg, no problem, I think, doing a redemption early on if that was the county's desire.
So Marty, to address another question then, you could, regardless if we take this option and we do it, next year you can do whatever you want. This option would not preclude you from doing another bond next year. Okay, so I think that was one of your questions. Okay.
And as long as, I thought you couldn't do like 2 in a row. You had to give a 1 year breather.
That's another section of the statute that Dennis could go into, but I'm going to say, Dennis, this schematic design, that's not applicable.
Correct, because we're doing the terms of greater than 5 years. If we were proposing a term of less than 5 years, then we would have to take our breather.
So Marty, I knew good and well we had to come up with an option that kind of addressed all possible pitfalls, and we think we have. Now, again, there, you know, people read things differently, but we think that would be the ultra flexible way to do it.
And this is a property tax levy and not then tied to our income tax at all.
It would be right into the 1782 like it always is. Yes, property tax. That's the way we do our GO bonds.
So you almost have to look at how bad the circuit breaker is going to hit us as to how much of a GO bond we might want to do, because that's going to make that circuit breaker hit.
Well, again,
quicker.
unless Bree disagrees with my mathematics, when you take off, if we did 6 for 6 and that was $1 million, if you take $1 million, add, you subtract 3 million, the net is 2 million, then you've got 2 million offsetting your additional ask for levy. If you got that, then that would put us probably $1 million back to where we are, right?
Right.
So
Got it.
that's a kind of high level math.
Oh, and I would just add to that high-level math works the first time you do this, but I think ultimately the request would probably be made for essentially to replace the current program. So after 6 years, the payment should kind of equalize out because you would, over 6 years, you would have essentially the same tax rate unless there's something that I'm not aware of, but over 6 years, you'd have $18 million in GO bonds, where right now our current process is in 6 years, you'd have $18 million over GO bonds. They're just getting paid out differently. So you would see a reduction in your tax rate the first 5 years, and then 6, it would kind of get back to where it is today. And so I just want to be clear that the math works that way, but if we're planning on continuing this $3 million GO bond into the future, eventually that math is going to work where it levels itself back to the current level.
As just as a reminder, when somebody says, so the tax rate's the same, we all know, we've learned that keeping the tax rate the same means that we intend to raise taxes on local folks, because the tax rate the same times is growing assessed value will bring it, that will raise their taxes.
Our
Unless we would
30.6.
change. I beg pardon?
Our 30.6, our 30 pennies right now will not be the same anymore. As AV goes down on that chart I sent you, it will no longer be what we're trying to maintain to. You cannot maintain to a 30-cent tax rate more than likely.
Okay, so you said you sent a chart, whatever. Did you send it this morning or something?
No, ma'am, this was what I went over last meeting and may have been in your minutes, but it's where we showed the value of a $500,000 home.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a lot to consider.
Yes. So that's why we said we better play we better give you the team concept here. And so at this point in time, Jeff, maybe it's proper that we pause on this subject, and Lizzie, if you want, and then we can get the full council and we can even put together an amortization. Dennis, one point I wanted to ask you is when we were doing this in another county, they said it couldn't be 6 over 5 years. You had to at least go 6 over 5 years and 1 month. Do you agree you need to stay away from the exact 5?
Yes, I would agree with that. That's the safe approach.
So that's why I said 6 for 6 is
You
kind of the max.
You could do 3 over
3 over 6.
5 months
Or-
and 5
5 years.
5 years and 2 months or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, I think Councilor Henry has a question.
As I'm not a member of the committee, but I'm just guest starring today, I guess I agree with Councilor Hawk that having, I think the written analysis will be helpful to look at the 3 options. I'm curious if anyone even has an estimate today of what's now prohibited under the GO bond that we can't do, that we're currently doing, and what percentage of the bond is really that we've been bonding for of things we can no longer do. Do we have a sense of that? Is it,
Oh, yeah.
Is it 25, 50%? I mean, what's the ballpark of how much we're currently bonding on that we're no longer going to be allowed to do? That changes our number substantially, and I think gets to a point that Councilor Hawk made, that if we are bonding on what we are now legally allowed to do, and if it's a number that really is not significant, we could go back to looking at the general fund as opposed to bonding every year.
And I'm going to let I'm going to try to answer this, and
Yeah,
then I'm
that's
going to
fair.
let Dennis follow up.
Yeah.
Because I want to be clear, because I think I made the statement that the note idea, which was option 2, had a lot of restrictions to it. And the note is not really a general obligation bond. It is a different mechanism within state code. And so that, I think, if you're looking at what we currently do, it's most of it. Right? If you were going to go the note, that is designed more for big renovation projects in buildings, right? That is what that is designed for. And we just haven't done that with our GO bonds, right? I mean, you might be able to fit something in each year that would follow that, but it really, it would be probably 90% of what we've issued GO bonds for would not be eligible under that note idea. I think the general obligation bonds, Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you could utilize those for really hasn't changed. So we really could use them for the same manners. The note one has a much more restricted use and the definition of what it can be used for, which makes sense because there's less process involved.
Yeah, that's good enough for today, but definitely needed. We're gonna need that in writing to look at, I think. So no, thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of to follow up on Jeff's point in regards to the other thing under new SB1, the real restriction is you can't do a general obligation bond for a term of less than 5 years without the cooling off period, unless that general obligation bond funds what's called a controlled project, meaning, you're issuing $7 million or more of bonds, then it's exempted. But we've not been doing that there in the county. We've been doing smaller bond issues. And so that's why, kind of as Greg mentioned, we're looking at this sort of 3 for 6, 6 for 6 option.
Okay, Marty, or Counselor Hall, excuse me.
So just to be clear, we could continue to do as we're doing right now. We just can't do it every year. We'd have to do it every other year. Is that correct?
So to be specific on that, and help me out, Dennis, if I get this wrong, but so let's say today we would, or, sometime this year, we would authorize our 1-year GO. We would then amortize it over next year, 26. We would be required to cool off for 27. We could come back at 28. And I think that's your option 1, right, Dennis?
That's what the state would.
No,
we can't even do option 1 because we've got a GO out there that puts us in that boat.
And just to be clear, the GO bond that we have out right now would prohibit us from issuing a new GO bond this year and next year, or just this year?
Or just 1 year.
I'd have to look at the amortization. Greg, do you have when the one we just issued, when that matures?
At the end of this year. So we need to back up what I said 1 more year, right?
Yeah, so we would have to wait a year from when this one expires before we could do another one.
It was my understanding too, Dennis, I thought, and again, it takes reading. So let's say it does pay off, Bree, you agree, it pays off the end of this year, correct?
We're finding the schedule right now, but that is what I believe to be correct.
So if we cannot authorize, then it pays off, I'm sorry, I do need to be corrected, 1/15/2026. So we back it up 1/15/2026. So at that point, since this is a 1 year, when do we have to wait till, Dennis, legally?
Can I just quickly add, the county traditionally pays those after settlement, so we will be paying it off this year, but the schedule notes January.
That's what I'm always used to, but the actual term is 1/15/2026. Back to you, Dennis.
So we'd have to wait till 1/15/2027 before we could issue.
So it's that 1-year period you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. From now. Mm-hmm.
And if we chose to do that, then we could use it in the same manner that we're using right now. We could use it for highway trucks or whatever we wanted to use it for. In 2027. Yeah. Well, that's enough.
Anything else from Counselor Hunk? No? Oh, since Counselor Henry is here, anything else from you? So I would really like to know what each of you really prefers that have talked to us about this. What are your best recommendations as we consider this?
Personally, I like the over 5 year option because I think it allows for projects to be reviewed on an annual basis. I think in the short term, property tax payers would see a reduction in the rate associated with a reduction in the amount of funds necessary to support the payment of that bond per year. And I think those two, I think the first one particularly fits into how we've always looked at it. We've always looked at it every year. We are going to prepare a list for the council to review, and then they would make the decision to utilize those funds on that. And I think that has worked out, I think, pretty well. It's always a struggle every year, which makes me think it's a good thing to do. But I always think that process, I think the other ones would have the council issue a larger amount. Option 3 would have them issue, or option, I guess 1, I've had an option where we would issue a series of bonds based upon one decision. To me, has been kind of counter to what the council has always expected. And I don't think the note works at all. So I would recommend the third option, which is the 1 year, or the same size, or maybe a little up it could be more. That would be the council's decision, but have that over a 6-year payback period as opposed to the other two options.
Okay, do you have a recommendation for us?
I'm sorry, was that directed to me?
Is there a recommendation from you, Dennis?
Yeah, I think what Jeff said, I would agree with. Given what the county's procedures and how they've operated in the past, I think that's going to allow you to kind of take a look at these each time and give you flexibility and keep things the way that they've been. And I think it's not just you. Greg mentioned he's working with another county. We're sort of having this discussion with a lot of our issuers that have been doing the same thing the county has. And I think we're going to see most of them are going to continue to do obligations, but just do them with longer terms. I think the net effect over the long term may be that there are fewer GO bond issuances just because people are doing them over a longer maturity. But they're keeping that sort of same capital planning in place by doing that.
Thank you. And Greg?
Maximum flexibility 0 to 6 over 5 years or beyond.
So that's the option 3. Is that right?
6 for 6.
Okay.
Up to. I want everybody to understand up to.
Right. All right. So do we, since I'm still pretty new at this, do we take a vote on our recommendation?
I would not expect you to vote on this.
Okay.
This is new to you guys. You guys need some time to digest it, and we need to present
Appreciate
it to
that
the
totally. Okay. So then now we're back on number 4 in the agenda. Is that right?
Thank you, Dennis.
Pardon me?
All right. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you
Dennis.
for being here for us. Back on number 4, is that correct? Approval of a recommendation by County Council regarding 2026 minimum fund balance resolution. So we had that packet, I believe.
Hi Liz, it's Molly. I'm online and I did make a slight change to it, so I'm going to display it on the screen as well.
Okay, thank you.
Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Okay, really the only changes, I added a title that includes the year for which this is applicable, because it sometimes gets confusing that it's a 2025 resolution that's applicable in a different year. And then I changed the date on which this would be adopted to the correct year. So it was pretty minor changes. This resolution in body is very similar to the one that was passed next year. The main difference is last year's had a minimum cash balance and a target cash or target fund balance. And when the auditor's office and council discussed this, there was a decision to just have one fund or one column. So now it's just the 2026 minimum fund balance. And so I believe that council office and auditor's office work to come up with these numbers. And so if there's questions regarding the actual numbers in that chart, I would defer to the auditor's office.
Okay, any questions here in the room?
I would like for the highway department to comment on what about, it seems to me last year when we were discussing this, that you had a concern that there would be some kind of a fund balance. You want to step up here so we can hear you? I certainly don't want to say, yes, this sounds good, then have everybody say later, this doesn't work.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, hadn't planned on talking, but we've never maintained a $2 million balance, never been able to. I don't know what the circumstances are if you don't have a $2 million balance in your MBH. We try and keep it at $1 million. Right now, I think we're at 1.3. We were gonna go in for an additional, but we didn't because of this resolution, because I don't know what happens being under that $2 million recommended balance. It's never been a discussion that I've ever had with anybody, so.
I would just say that we know that their revenue comes in different than some of the revenue, like for instance with general fund, and they cannot spend any more than what the revenue actually produces for them. And so to put an artificial minimum fund balance on any of these highway positions, that's just not something I would.
Our 1176 was, for the first time I've ever been at the county highway, was $500,000 over budgeted for 2025. We split with an 1173 and 1176. We took our guidance from the auditor's office on setting those up. I'm not comfortable being over budgeted. So yeah, I just kind of follow along on what numbers are being presented, but again, I've never had any conversation with anybody on this, so.
I could have swore we had a conversation.
You and I have.
Oh, okay, I was going to say, did
That's
I
it.
dream
That's
that
after
one?
I saw it in all the paperwork.
So I just think it's, that's overstepping what we should be doing, because the highway gets their money, the state tells us what the dollars amount that they're going to get, and they keep that in track. And we don't ever want you to spend down past the zero, but you know that. And for us to tell you an amount so that you can't move those dollars around to make sure you're using.
I can't pay salaries to maintain a $2 million cash balance.
Yes.
I mean, it's counterproductive to what your mission is, so.
Did you say already, and I missed it, what is your current minimum fund balance, or is there one?
Right now, I think, no, we don't we've never been told to have a minimum.
So this is all new?
This is all new. Right now, we have like 1.3. We've never tried to go under $1 million, just in case of emergencies.
Yeah.
But we can't maintain.
I hear you.
Do what we feel like we need to do. We already get council assistance that we'll have to continue.
Yes, please.
I would offer an amendment that if you're, not that I can offer amendment, but.
You can make a suggestion.
So would you be comfortable with 750 or $1 million? Or 500?
What's the,
Because
I guess
the goal is to have a
what's
fund.
the punishment if I go under
There isn't.
the resolution?
There
Well,
is.
I can't sit here and say that, but
Right. So
I've been
this
told
is,
I can't do other things.
so this is the amount that's going to be, again, we're trying to get it updated. We're trying to come under a concept that when you might consider it an emergency, like you said. And so I'm assuming when you said it might be emergency if I went below 1 million, and we kind of considered them together, but they're separate. So if we put the 2 million down to 750, that would give you an absolute, you wouldn't really go below that floor. So that's what and again, this will be updated each and every year. And so we might even exclude the highway next time. So there's always
I
that
guess that would beg the question, why is it included this time?
To include most of the major funds, and that's the reason. There's no absolute that any fund has to be in there unless you made a decision otherwise.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
And if I just may quickly, I think there was maybe between legal preparing this and the work we did in the office, we intended for the minimum balances to be and not the target. And I think the target numbers were used here.
Oh.
So they should be lower, actually.
Oh.
So this will need to be edited.
Okay.
Unless you're comfortable with these numbers, but we were not as we put it together.
Well, I see exactly what Lisa's saying, and I agree.
I do as well.
And again, it's guidance. It's set for 2026. So if I thought all the other numbers looked awful good at this point, and so if you want to say, okay, let's put in the target ones, which is the ones I was kind of focusing in on, but these, we can bring it back. Why don't we do that?
Okay.
If we're not gonna have the minimum versus target, I'm more comfortable with establishing the minimum. However, we're going to, we appreciate your guidance and want that and want to go with that. So
We'll bring it back.
Is that okay? Bring it back?
Right. I can see really the point in the ones that are in what I call the frozen levy. So we know that we've got to keep that frozen levy can only increase so much every year. And if we see one of these that are inside the frozen levy is dropping too far, just like we did with the health, we're going to have to make up the difference this coming year. And I can understand why you would do the rainy day, but I just step in self-insurance for certain. So you'd want the general fund, the aviation, reassessment, definitely the self-insurance. A cube cap might be, but that's not inside that smaller frozen levy. Some of the others are you can move money back and forth, but with highway, you don't move money back and forth. I mean, highway, it's not a part of the, well, let's fund this over here under highway. So I don't know why we would try to keep them from spending in order to meet, they sometimes move from one fund to another to fill more potholes and just do less of something else. But I don't want to throw a thorn in everybody's side. I'm just saying I don't see the purpose, but. And the special purpose, that's one that we definitely this year need to take a hard look at because that's the one that we reduced the rate going into that. That's what we used to call the juvenile income tax, and put that rate over into the jail fund. Because it wasn't really needed for that special purpose. But we need to, all of us, be taking a look at that and doing a look out to see when we need to change that rate or move some. And I think the auditor doesn't agree with what I've been saying, but whatever, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think differing opinions are healthy. However, I like the idea of there being a guide, just an idea of what we feel is would keep us the healthiest as far as fund balances. So more like a guide to consider as we move forward. We have had fund balance issues in the past with some of these funds, and I think that is probably why FSG made this recommendation initially, and also it helps with our bond rating.
And it's best practice.
Yes.
It's best practice.
I'm wondering if terminology couldn't play a factor here. Would it be prudent to think about calling it a suggested fund balance rather than a minimum fund balance?
That's kind of why I went with the target.
Huh?
Having done this many, many times and all the different, it's a target we'd like to hit. We discuss whether we're over it or under it. We do not want to have constraints.
Yeah, I think minimum says to me, it sets a floor, right? And I think some other terminology might not be as indicative of absoluteness, so to speak.
Sure. I think what the intention was to use the minimum fund balance numbers, however, as the target fund balance
But
suggestions.
we're not saying that anywhere in the document.
Correct.
Right. Somehow we
Several
need to
departments
explain
working on this, so there, I think signals were
Right.
crossed when
We
with
could
the
change
final
that.
product.
We could change that and make
Absolutely.
it say that, right? So that's what I'm suggesting, that
I agree.
we explain our intent, right? I like intent to be clarified. So would that be good, do you think?
I agree 100%. I think we're trying to say the same thing.
Okay. Counselor Hogg.
I'm seeing that the election fund was left off of here, and I think we need to include that. Because what the election fund doesn't cover, we have to make up the difference out of the general fund. So it's important to think of those as working in tandem. We have, the intent was to allow that election fund balance to grow so that when it was time for a presidential election year, the fund would already be there, and we're not spending that down every year and moving that over, that levy over to the general fund. When you do that, that means on that fourth year when you hit the presidential, you've got to make up a lot of money that we weren't prepared for. So I think that should be added. But once again, I'm not in favor of getting in the way of the highway. I mean, if they ever would spend down to getting us in trouble, they're the ones that be in trouble. They have to watch and make sure they can make payroll, because we don't make their payroll.
Right,
They
sure.
make their payroll.
Yes.
When I say we, I mean, we're all paying for it, but I'm just saying their payroll is paid for out of the money coming in from gas tax and wheel tax and whatever other revenue that's coming in there. And if I've got that wrong, please.
So again, I would recommend we bring the highway down to $1 million or $750,000. I would not, Marty, probably agree. I wouldn't recommend putting the election fund. You and I know the election fund very, very well. But I think that might get administratively more difficult. And we're trying to get something in place, review it each and every year, and not go too low into the fund categories.
What's the hesitancy of putting the election fund there? I'm not sure I heard a reason. What's the hesitancy?
It becomes an ebb and a tide, as we all know. And
Right.
so it'll go to a low point afterwards, and then it'll start building. And so if we don't size it to the low point after the major election, then you're going to get restrictive again to a certain degree, even though this doesn't restrict. And so I think it's just right now, the election fund, it may be, I don't even know what the balance would be. And it may be a hard one to peg. So, but we can sure put it if you want it. What would the balance be right now in the election fund? Bree?
He's getting it.
She is loud.
Okay.
Ready to go.
I guess maybe to.
Goes up and down, and the city pays us back for the costs and so forth.
Could add maybe a little more tangible thing to Greg's objection is, I expect when we do a ratings call, they would ask about a variety of things. And if that election fund balance is changing annually, then I would expect to get a lot of questions about that as to why that funding, why that funding's so much different than the other. It's explainable, but I guess from my perspective, that is one where a minimum fund balance over time, that concept doesn't really hold well. I think the 4-year cycle, and I think we track that four-year cycle separately to begin with anyway, and it comes up every year budget time. So I think looking at that, we already look at that differently because it's different. And so adding it to this is almost trying to put a square peg in a round hole. At least that's my impression.
I think you got my attention when you talked about the ratings.
I do have the cash balance in the election fund if you'd like that. I'm showing it at just over 1.2 million.
And 1.2, and then I checked the 1782, it's projected to be 1.5. So, if we put it in there, I would suggest something like 500 to start with.
Councilor Hawk?
What is that
Anything?
noise?
That's the first Friday, I think. As far as I know, it's the first Friday, right? First Friday, noon siren. It's a test.
Doesn't sound like that at my house. Okay.
It's a
whatever.
test.
You folks go ahead and move with this any way you wish to.
Okay.
Let's just get this done.
So, what do we need to do then about this? Do we need to actually?
Just bring it back at the next LTF meeting.
Okay, and that's okay with everyone? Okay.
Is this not something that will be decided by the entire council? Just,
So
I
Ms.
would
Hawk-
suggest we move this forward to the next council, and in my opinion, it should be a no recommendation if we have any questions, or move it forward with approval, whichever you'd rather. Let's just move it off of our calendar and move it over to the county council. It's not our choice.
County council okay for it to go to? Does that make sense?
I guess the
Councilor Fidel?
Molly would like to say
Oh,
something.
Molly, sure. Mhm.
So the intent today was for LTF to review the resolution, which clearly needs some edits, and then LTF was either going to recommend it to full council with a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation. So if we just want to send this to full council for discussion, I think that would be appropriate.
I'm
And
fine with that.
remember, it does not have to be positive or negative. You can
Just
send
that
it
for
forward,
discussion.
just like the plan commission could do,
Right.
with no recommendation, and get this moving forward, because you'll get it all right, the changes that need to be made, and move it forward.
But it seems like I'm
We've got a
hearing
lot
that.
on our
I
plate.
know. So let's move it forward with no recommendation at this point. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to take a vote on that?
I would.
So we'll, I'll entertain.
Make the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move that we take this report and move it on to the full council with no recommendation, expecting that there will be changes made by the council attorney.
I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. I seconded it.
Yes.
All in favor? Marty, are you in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, we're good.
Wow.
We're moving on. Okay, so now we're talking about the COLA discussion and recommendation, as far as I can tell. We're on number 5. So I think there was an intent to update Greg on we sent a letter to, so you probably saw that, and get feedback on that. So we're open to hearing what you have to tell us or say about that.
Sure, I thought it was a very well done letter. I believe what I had told you before, and I just want to qualify, that the growth quotient was 4% for next year. Now, where I want to highly caution you, I've now gone into to talking to Representative Thompson and asked about the 4%. I thought it was an awful nice increase for some reason, and I was waiting for the rest of the story. Part of the rest of the story was it is my understanding that they were actually going to grant 2%. They gave an additional 2% to help offset the $300. And so that is why it's 4%. The effective yield across the state was 4, should really give you 2% real dollar more. We believe it will not give Monroe County 2% real dollars more without the additional new, the levy coming back, right? And so our recommendation still is 0 to 3%, do not exceed 3%. I point blank asked even Representative Thompson, if I was looking at a 4% tax or increase in payroll this year, would you say yes or no? And he said, no, I would not advise that. I said, good, that's not what I'm advising. So maximum 3%, 0 to 3.
Any other discussion about this, Councilor Hawk?
Right. I think this might be a good time because always when we're talking about what kind of a salary increase, you'd be talking about what kind of levy increase dollars that might actually represent. And so this might be a good time to talk about whether we count the levy increase if we're just doing it by the separate funds. If we did, I think the general fund levy for this year, because the increase is supposed to be over the present year's levy. The next year's levy, if they say 4%, it would be times this year's general fund levy. Each of those would be come together as the frozen levy. The 4% would have to cover all of it. Of course, that also has to cover that additional amount for health, which we said was going to have to be. But if you take, let's say if you take 4%, are we talking about, if we're just talking about the general fund, 4% of the general fund is like right now is 17 million something,
17,818. So if I take my, or if my staff member has his, if we take that times, by the way, this is Tate, as you know, he's with me. And if we take that times 4%, then that's what we're going to get. My calculator is not showing up here.
Be a little under 800,000.
Yeah.
I think there was a discrepancy between the max levy that we could have gotten and what we actually requested last year.
Absolutely.
So if
yeah, so
I guess maybe the question is.
That's why I wanted to ask this question.
Yeah.
Are we?
So I can.
Are we taking that 4% times where our present levy is, which is the way the legislation reads? If I look at it right.
So here's the way we've done it so far. Your 24 actual levy was 21.3. Your 25, we believe, is going to be 17.8. You know, the exact number we talked about. We believe the 26 will be 21,350. 21,350,000. Would you have a reason to disagree? That's what we built into the sustainability. That includes the aspect and the 4%.
You lost me. Let's go back to let's make up a number. Let's say if it's 18, which is where our levy is for general right now.
Right. For 25.
So let's just say it's 18.
Yes.
And you take 4 times 18.
Right. So the actual normal maximum levy was 25.6, which makes up the 17, and the growth on the 4%. The growth on the 4% with or without is not that great. So the key is getting back the lost levy. That's the meaningful number.
Hey, I mean, you're talking in circles as far as I'm concerned. I just want to know if we take the growth allowed times our present levy, our exact present levy,
So
then the growth number is how much?
Okay, so if we take the 4% times the 17.8, it's around 712,000. But what I'm cautioning you, okay, is you're going to budget 712. You're not going to get 712. You're going to get at best half that because of the lost revenue coming in from the $300 credit.
Okay, thanks. All right, because when we were talking about what kind of a salary increase, and I just think it was just all happening so quick. It was like, okay, let's just like, we got to say something, and that's where the 3% raise came in. Well, the 3% raise, I got a figure yesterday. Just for general, I think was over 800,000. Anybody have new numbers for us?
I'm working on those. I will have that later today.
So I hope nobody's expecting us to make a decision without information. I mean, I'm just saying. And it's not fair to you to ask you to help us make that decision when we don't have the right numbers.
That's why we're saying we hold the course. I believe the recommendation so far out of the letter was 3%. I did talk
That was the proposed percentage.
Yes. By the way, I did talk to the council president yesterday on the phone, just kind of in preparation for today. And she also came back and informed me that the step increases had been frozen. Is that correct? Or no? Okay.
No, there is a pause with regards to departments going to WIS, asking for classification reviews, as well as a pause on knowledge, skills, and assess abilities with regards to hiring new employees at the different step increase levels rather than the minimum. So that has all been put on pause.
Okay. Yeah, and that was the correct terms. Thank you. And so given that, I think the letter still is quite handy and let's begin there. And as we move forward, I mean, in essence, don't ask for 6%, right? We don't have that unless there was a special situation, then my understanding is that may come up. But at this point in time, that's where we're at.
Okay. You would almost had to be there to see how we got to where we got to. I mean, we were first of all had a meeting and they were trying to decide what kind of a raise to give. And so the question was made by the members of the council, what is it going to cost? What's the financial implication? So we had another meeting, but it appeared that all of it was put together no matter where the revenue was coming from. And there was major discussion going on at the council level. And it was like a big push to get that letter out from the council so the department heads could put together budgets. And so that's just sort of the 3% came kind of out of some kind of the cost of living report from wherever. But we didn't really have the numbers, and we were just voting like I said, we don't even have the numbers to know what we're voting on here to really understand by fund, because as far as I'm concerned, you have to look at it by fund, because the revenue comes in by fund.
All right. So if you recall, actually, I recommended in the prior meeting not exceed 3%. Because I said we'll be lucky to even get there. So actually, I've said across the state, don't go more than 3%. Would I like to see 2%? Sure. Yeah, to be able to give, and I've worked with salary committees in other counties, Hancock County, and I said, do not give 5%. And they were like, we'll give 5% now, and we'll say 0 in the future. No, what makes more sense is some now. And I said this before at this meeting, let's give some, maybe 2%, 2% next year, 2% after that. That to me makes more sense.
Okay, and what you said earlier was we're not really going to get 4, we're going to get how much? 2.
at best.
So I think it is very irresponsible to say, go ahead and figure a 3% raise if all of our new revenue is not going to be more than 2, would seem to me.
Well,
But we don't even have the numbers.
Right, I agree. But I think for me, the key language in that letter said proposed 3%. So that, to me, that indicated that it might go up to that, but it could be something different than that. That's how I interpreted it.
Right, it's just that we know our, first of all, it's up to the council.
Yes.
And this is beginning to sound like a budget meeting, and this is not supposed to be a budget meeting. This is supposed to be long-term finance, and so this decision should not be made by 2 people on, sitting here on this long-term finance committee because it's budget. But when we get more information, I'm hoping the council will take another look at this, but it really, as Councilmember Wiltz said, they're going to have, all these departments are going to have to rework all their budgets, and they're in the process right now trying to put budgets together. And if we think 3% is really not sustainable, or we're really spending down our cash just to make this work, what are we going to do when we don't have it for the following year? I just have concerns. I voted in favor to just send it forward so the departments could start working. But once again, I think this is a budget issue and not a long-term range finance issue.
So will we then, is it the will of these 2 here today to move forward with a discussion and no recommendation? Is that right?
Right, but before we go there, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding the information we're receiving. If we are to look at our projected revenue, including our levy growth of 4, but really it's going to end up with 2, we look at what our approved maximum levy, what we were approved this year. And that means we had a $3.8 million less. So we figure out what it is times this year. We don't just like bump it up to 3.8 and put another 4 on top of that. Do I understand you correctly?
So you're going to use the maximum levy that is in the 1782, to the best of my knowledge. This doesn't happen very often. That's what I see. And the difference is 854 versus 712. So you're talking about $150,000 that you probably won't ever get either. Or it'll be cut in half at best too. So that's that. And now remember, it's divvied up the way it was divvied up. You're making an assumption that it's divvied up in 26, the same way it's divvied up in 25. And what I've said in the sustainability, and I know the writing's on the wall, we need that levy back in the general fund. Otherwise, the report I showed you last year, where cash was going like that, okay, it's really going like that. So keep that in mind, okay? We got to have that levy back in the general fund. Otherwise, we're out of balance, and I still have us out of balance on a 26 estimated basis. But we need the 26 budgeted numbers from the department heads before we can move solidly ahead.
What about the 3.8 million that was short?
That's what I said. I have projected most of that will go into the general fund. That's where we needed it. That's where it was.
I just ask a clarifying question because I'm getting
Please.
a little lost over here. Last year, 1782s came back with 17 plus million as our general fund levy.
Yes.
All right, so when the council goes to approve the tax rates and levies for next year, they should include the 3.8 plus 4% on top of that in what they approve, knowing that it'll probably get cut back because of various SB1 factors. Am I right or wrong on that?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I might even put in 5%,
Okay.
just for factors unknown to us today.
And taxpayers, I hope you guys all understand, the taxpayers this year, more than one of them come up to me and say, I thought my taxes were going to go down because of the 3.8 million wasn't on there, and my taxes didn't go down a bit. Well, that was because, the school and whatever ate up what we might have lost. But if you put that on top of where people are this year, on top of that, and put another 4% on top of that, folks, I mean, are we really going to do that? Because we are here not just to represent county government, but to represent the people who support county government. But that's just me. Anyway, it's not our choice.
Yeah, so our tax rate in '24 was 0.357 pennies. Our tax rate for '25 was 0.3064. We have gone to the lowest tax rate in the last 10 years for Monroe County itself.
I get it.
Okay?
Yeah.
And now, Marty, you also see why the GO discussion became why I said 6 for 6, because I'm looking at the totality. I'm not looking at GO versus whatever. I'm looking at the total picture. Okay? And trying to achieve where you're trying to go. But keep in mind, we had a significant reduction. I call that very material reduction in our Monroe County tax rate. We can't help what others did. But the writing's in the numbers. It's in the numbers.
And is that I think that legislation starts right now, that when we do that, we have to have a special meeting set aside just for that, with nothing else on that, and to say to the taxpayer that we are going to raise this tax higher than the 4% over our present tax levy.
No, ma'am. That is not my understanding that it's in play this year. It comes later. Do not have to have any special hearings this year, being 2025 for 2026. And staff all agrees.
That was yesterday at the meeting we attended, so that it's not for this coming budget year.
Okay,
Moving on.
I think we might need to move on, right? But I don't know about a recommendation. What are we doing here, Councilor Hawk, about that? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? It says COLA discussion and recommendation.
It's we don't have the numbers anyway. How
Right.
do we make a recommendation?
So I think without the numbers, we will just be neutral on that recommendation
Right.
and forward it on to the council. Is that right?
Right. We until we get
We don't have
exactly
it.
what it's going
I'm
to
with you.
cost per fund.
So do we need a vote on the neutral recommendation then? Do we need a vote on the neutral recommendation?
You want me to make a motion?
Well, I don't know if we need one, or do we just need to have the discussion?
Honestly, without the numbers, I'm not even sure what you're forwarding to them.
We just were forwarding the fact that we had this discussion and it will come up again, right? But I think that may be obvious, right? The fact that it's going to come up again at the council. So maybe we don't need to have that.
I guess if it were me, and again, I'm not on the council, is that I think until you have what you consider adequate information for a decision to be made, I don't think you have anything really to forward onto
I
them.
was just looking at the agenda where it said recommendation. So I was just trying to find.
My recommendation would be that you look at this at your next meeting and hopefully you'll have more information.
Okay, so do we need to have a vote to do that? That's the question. No vote necessary. All right,
And
we're
for
going to
the-
move on.
Further, I would just like for us to take another look at what our mission is here, and I do not think we're a budgeting year by year committee, but if we have changed the rule and the role of what the long-term finance committee is supposed to be doing, then I don't want us to be the budget committee, because I want to pick up the phone and call you whenever I want to discuss the budgets, which I could not do if we are now the budget committee. So that it was never set up to be that way. So I think that any two or three of us could get together and discuss budgets, and we don't have to do that in public. And we can meet with others, whatever. But for a formal committee such as this, then if it is suddenly the budget committee, I can't talk with you about budgets anymore. That's not acceptable.
I think at this point, we're moving on to number 6. Is that right?
Absolutely.
All right. So that says self-insurance budgets, and item A is self-insurance operating fund.
Yeah, so Bree's going to take, I think, A, and give us kind of an update on where we are. On 6B, I'm running into people on vacation at the State Board of Accounts. The answer is the self-insurance reserve fund is going to be recommended. It is recommended by me for the long-term financial health of the county. It has been done in many, many places. I've got $3 million in Hendricks. I've got $3 million in Hancock. I've got $500,000 in Shelby. The State Board of Accounts is kind of just saying, hey, we don't know why you're doing it, and I'm going to explain why we're doing it, and it makes good financial sense. When you have something go awry and you get something way over your stop loss, you got to have a way to do it as money gets tighter and tighter. So we'll be coming back 6B after I discuss it with the State Board of Accounts and saying, really, this is not an audit. This is not, they're trying to play kind of like financial advisor. And I want to just assure them there's financial reasons to do it. And it's not an audit, should not be an audit issue in any way, shape, or form. So 6A.
So wait, when will it come back then? I missed that. Did you
Next
say?
meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is absolutely essential that we do not let that fund be reduced too far, because it only takes just one big turn this upside down. So
exactly.
we simply can't do that.
Yep, we need the what if. Okay, so A.
Thank you. There has been an extensive review of the self-insurance fund recently. We're currently sitting at a $4.9 million balance.
Million or billion?
Pardon?
Million or billion?
Million.
Thank you.
Certainly not billion.
Just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. That'd be nice. However, we've noticed that this fund has been trending down. It appears that healthcare has gotten more expensive. The county is expending the funding more quickly.
Right.
We've been very conservative with the budgeting in the past, where we probably should have raised that a little bit more. However, we are focused on that at this time. The president's letter asked that we budget $18,000 per position, which will help us go into the right direction. I had a great conversation with the Commissioner's Administrator recently, and she has been communicating with our vendors and getting some financial information on what to expect moving forward. And I know that FSG has also been very involved in this. So my comfort level this year, and I believe it's the same for the Commissioner's Administrator, is that the council consider an additional appropriation, budgeting maybe around $1,500 to $1,600, so $1,600 per employee to address any potential shortfalls in this fund for 2025. it seems that we start to trend lower and more and more expenses come through toward the end of the year as people meet their deductibles and so forth. So that would just be a safety net for the county. And then with the anticipated much larger budget per position, we anticipate being in much better shape in this fund for 2026.
And so the 1,600 is in addition to the 18.
It is. We need to address, and this we're simply analyzing expenses right now and projecting. So I can't tell you for certain where we'll be at the end of the year. However, some projections have indicated that the fund will either be very low or even in the red at the end of 25.
And so that I understand it, since I'm pretty new, if this operating fund then needs other monies, does it come out of the self-insurance reserve fund, or where does it come out of?
We currently do not have a reserve fund, and there needs to be more conversation with the State Board of Accounts because they currently indicate that is not a possibility. However, I think other counties may have that. So we're going to work with State Board of Accounts and see whether or not that would be a possibility. More conversation needs to be had. However, regardless of where the funding lies, we need to have a healthy operating balance. And I think our comfort level for the immediate future is about 1.5 million. And we need to significantly increase that in the future.
I see a hand over here, Michelle.
Yes, I just spoke with the Commissioner's Administrator. We want to make sure that you understand that the additional amount that they're asking for is for 2025. And that additional amount will be either 1,500 or 1,600, right? Pardon? Okay. That is not to be included for the 2026 amount. That's just that amount that they're asking is the additional amount for this year.
The current year.
Correct.
Okay.
Am I correct in that, Angie? Is that what you're saying? Okay. I just want to make sure that there's two different things.
Councilor Hawk?
Okay. Yes, and just for us to remember, the reason why the state has a problem with having this reserve fund is because they continue to remind us we're only allowed one rainy day fund. And if they consider this to be more like a rainy day fund, they're going to say, no, you can't have two rainy day funds.
But if you recall, my guidance from the get-go was you would not call it a rainy day fund. We do not do that in the counties that we have it. We call it a reserve fund, and that's why I specifically called it a reserve fund. And they don't, if you read their email very, very carefully, they want to know why we just don't keep it in 6A. And I'm going to say the track record speaks for itself.
Okay.
So.
Right. And if we didn't do it like in a reserve fund, we would just need to keep the operating fund much higher.
And watch it
Correct.
very, very carefully, yes.
I mean, some way or the other, we have to just.
Yeah.
Well, we have to
Get
pay
that.
the bills.
Right,
Yeah.
just add to it. So how much is that total that we need for additional for this year? And the other question is, which we've had some response from some of the department heads, especially maybe some with the grants or whatever, if they know they don't have, if their employees are not using the insurance, they still have to count in their budget for so many people. And I would assume, first of all, that sort of helps spread the insurance cost around. But in addition to which, if they have one person leave and another person comes in and needs the insurance, then their budget would be, the whole thing would be off. So I hope that they have received an answer to their questions. I think that was at that meeting. Was that just yesterday? It seems like 3 years ago now, when they were questioning whether or not they would have to include everyone. So, do we have a dollar amount of what the total amount of the additional is going to be asked for?
I think we're comfortable with, and obviously it's worth the mercy of the council here, but around 1 million, which works out to over 1,500 per employee, right in between 15 and 16. Is that the discussion I'm recalling, Angie?
I don't recall having that.
Sorry, can you come to the mic so that everybody else can hear what's going on?
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a whole row of table left over. You can
Yeah, we
just
can
sidle
borrow
right up
David's
here.
mic.
Here's the chair. Here's the chair right here. Oh, yeah.
All right, thanks. So part of this is kind of somewhat dependent on how badly this fund does for this particular year. But I had, in my mind, in order for us to end the year with a balance of 1.5 million, we would need an additional $1,573,636.27, which is equated to $2,458.81 per full-time employee of Monroe County.
Is that different than what you were talking about?
It is. When we spoke yesterday, I thought we were talking about a $1 million, considering a $1 million appropriation this year. So whatever the recommendation is, I'm
sorry, yes, that conversation, but I thought we were talking in generalities because I didn't have the actual amount. So yeah, it was $1 million. But that is the recommendation.
So give us again the more specific numbers, if you please. So we're not talking about 1,600 per employee. We're talking about a different number. Is that right? Can you tell us that different amount now?
You want it per employee, or do you want the total amount requested?
I want both of them.
Okay, so the total amount is 1,573,636.27.
That's the total amount that is recommended for the fund to be sustainable through this year.
To end the year with a balance of 1.5 million.
Okay.
And that equates to
Yes.
$2,458.81 per full-time employee in the budget. Again, we're kind of playing with crystal balls.
I get you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not absolute until you spend the money,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell, right? Mm-hmm.
Could I ask the additional money we got for the supplemental, was that, that's still setting in the general fund, right? Yes?
You should answer specifically the supplemental associated with the general fund, because there's supplementals on all lists.
Right, I just
So-
mean that the general fund
Yes.
supplemental has not been moved over. We had talked at one time moving money over into the rainy day. Have we moved any to the rainy day yet this year?
No, council would have to approve that.
Yeah, I'm just
Supplemental
saying.
lid I have is 1,260,000 into the general fund.
Now, but that sounds accurate.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a budget question.
All right, anything else on 6A or B? Or we covered that well enough? Right. 7, are we on Senate Bill 1 now? That one,
I think we kind of did Senate Bill
Yeah.
1 all morning long.
yeah, exactly.
And Bree has put together another spreadsheet that shows the tax impact of the lid. I think you just look that over in light of it almost being Q1, and then we can move to number 8.
Moving on to number 8, you all right? What's going on? Counselor Hawk? Okay, so we've got Senate Bill 1 B, which is fiscal impact to taxpayers. What do we have there?
Is this the information we received this morning?
That was on the first one. He just talked about that. He talked about the chart we
That
received.
Bree put together.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we,
Yes, at this point, do you have any recommendations or thoughts you want to share with council about fully utilizing the lid or is it too soon?
so the only other discussion we may want to, if you'll pass this out, Nate. So the council, and we've made Jeff aware of this, and this was not discussed yesterday, but the county council has the right to replace some of the lost revenue as a result of the $300. It specifically falls under the county council. It specifically, if you notice here, is not defined, should not be defined, but we put it in the bucket of circuit breakers. So Representative Thompson told me Monday it is not circuit breaker. I agree. It's a credit to the taxpayer, the $300. So you'll both get a $300 credit right off your tax bill. Okay. That will be lost revenue to the county. If you recall, I said that's why the growth quotient was 4, to make up for some of that. But here we've calculated out, Bree, with your help, $1,610,000 is the lost revenue to the county's portion, which were 17.5 of the tax rate. So you have, the county council has the ability, and I discussed this with Ms. Crosley yesterday, and we have this possibility in the statute. Most people haven't even read that little section because it wasn't discussed yesterday. I brought it up to one of the Barnes and Thornburg attorneys, and they're looking at it. It's been sent to Jeff. He's looking at it. It was buried, okay? It has some indications. What it would do is basically give a taxpayer more of a credit, which would relieve some circuit breaker. So if you really want to get complicated, I am, but one goes down, one goes up, okay? Right now you can see that we're dealing with 1.6 million. So as Jeff gets educated on this section, and again, everybody comes back to me and says, well, wait a minute, we got a Cadgett County here with a what I call the phantom tax council. That's this point part of the statute. I'm the CPA, I'm not the attorney. That's why the attorney's got to give you the opinion. It does say the county council, doesn't say anything else. So this is a section that I want Jeff to get educated on. Bree, you probably need to look at it, and maybe the overall possibility, if we want, but I'm not advising anything yet at this point in time. I want everybody to get satisfied that is something we can use. Now, I will put you on an all points bulletin notice that by August 1, if you were, I believe this is going to be applicable on this section, August 1, if you're going to change the lit and do migration for juvenile detention, Marty, as you had indicated, or anything like that, we must give notice by August 1. Keep in mind, I have counties that issue that notice every year in January 1 and say, you know, we think we're going to do it. And that's again, I think you've done that before in the past, Jeff. You've given that notice, haven't you? If not, we can provide you with it.
I will check with Molly because she would have been the one who would have done that.
So that's your deadline coming, and you need to make these decisions by October 1 for it to be in place for 26. So I just discussed this in Hancock County this week, and everybody's like, we thought maybe it was July 1. It is not. It's August 1. Give notice. adjust your lits by October 1. And maybe the city is going to be adjusting lit also. So we're really going to have to really get our ducks in a row if we're going to do certain things. So at this point in time, Ms. Crosley, I'd said I would just bring this section of the code up, tell everybody, let's look at this little section that's in the SB 1 and let's give it some thought. That's about where I want to leave it.
I ask a question that may
Sure.
bring up something earlier that we talked.
Of me? Jeff? Or?
The increase to the county share circuit breaker, you have 1.6 million.
Yes.
Is that when you were saying they gave the 4, but we're only going to get 2 because of the 300? Is that kind of the 2% that you were talking about?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Because LSA is 2.3. Okay, down, see my footnote there?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the county share of the 9 million, right, Bree? And so assumed within, a couple things were assumed within the 2.3. Now, remember, when the LSA estimates were run, they were run county by county, but they were at the facts and the figures that existed. LSA does a fabulous job. I'm not gonna badmouth them at all. I'm not doing that. They did a good job with the facts and figures they had it there at the moment they did it, and they were pretty tight on time. But now we're specific to Monroe with your homesteads using the most of the 300, not all. Matter of fact, we did another calculation yesterday and said, based upon some of the numbers that you've given us, that may yield down to an average for the county of maybe 250,000. And I had another county, it's 275. So, but we are estimating on the high side. So that was rolled up according to Representative Thompson. He told me there was a report specifically on the 300, but I don't think it exists. They may have had it at that night, but that rolls up to the 2.3, and I'm worried that maybe the 2.3 is not high enough, but maybe we were a little too conservative or too much on the 1.6. So that's the answer to your question. I'm sorry if I confused you further.
No, I think that number, the increase in county share of CV, that's what when we talked about, hey, they gave us 4%, but they really only gave us 2%. That number is the hypothetical difference, knowing every county is different and it's never going to be exactly 4 or 2%.
And I call it circuit breaker, and I was corrected several times earlier this week. It's not circuit breaker, it's lost revenue. I understand. I just put it in the total bucket of we don't get that money as a county. Okay, so.
Yes, Councilor Hunk.
Right. I would think that also because of the change in the circuit breaker rules for the over 65, and if you look at our circuit breaker report, you'll see a large number of the loss of circuit breakers is for those over 65. And because that legislation changed and it will affect what we receive or will not be receiving next year, it's great for the taxpayer, but it will be less dollars for us because they raised the revenue of how much people could make, and they also took away any ceiling of how much the assessed value could be for the property.
I understand that. Yes, you're right.
So if you looked at our circuit breaker report and you looked at how many were over 65 and you recognize that's good, that dollar amounts could be greater if more and more people apply for it, because more people will be qualified to receive it.
Right, and it is my understanding that LSA used that in the 2.3. There is a lot going on in that 2.3.
Okay, now I know you had discussion with others. Evidently, you had a meeting yesterday. I wasn't a part of that.
Well, no, there wasn't a meeting. I called
the one.
Miss Crosley about anything else I needed to cover today. That was it.
Okay, I'm hearing you say something about 2.3, and what are you talking about?
That is the LSA number at the very bottom of this page. That is the LSA number that's been in print for
Oh,
40 days.
2,300,000. I was looking for
Yes.
something that said 2.3
Oh,
as a
okay.
percent.
No,
Okay.
2,000,003.
Okay.
That's the county share, 9 million. Estimated by everybody.
Okay, and this is based on the existing 1782 notice, which you're suggesting that, I looked at that, made me think of something else as well. Because our revenue source for our income tax is tied to our property tax levy. And so our property share was 3.8 million less than we would be receiving, because that is a part of the way they compute how much we're going to get at the income tax certified share distribution.
Well, so I think one of your taxes is actually population-based, correct? And so the other ones are levy-based. So yes, in your hypothetical, if the levy goes up, the income taxes will go up for 1 year in 2027.
When you look at the distribution numbers of the certified share income tax distribution, if you look what our certified share is for this year, because that was based on numbers, previous year's numbers. Next year's numbers will be based on this year's levy numbers, 25 numbers. It seemed to me a good way to look at that, because we don't have that information back from the state. We could take like maybe the 4 highest units that receive a distribution of the certified shares. That would be the city, the county, the library, and the fire district. And you could look to see what their property tax levy was approved on their 1782s, and see which of those were higher or less, and come up with an amount that we could see how much higher to where we are now. I mean, I can almost see it in my head how to do it. I'm not making a lot of sense. But
I'm with you.
the 4 higher ones, we can figure out where we stack up with this. Then you can make up a number, put 100, and see what our percentage is of the 100. And then we would know what our percentage up or down might be for our total once we get, I mean, just as a way to make an estimate.
So, in just simply say it, 26 income taxes that you receive are based upon the prior year's levy in the ones that are not population-based.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's a certified share one.
And since 25's levy was less, then we'll have a little less in 26. Then it will go up in 26, which will get a little bit more in 27. And after that, it's all done.
I'm just saying, when we're looking at our revenue for our budgets for 2026, and we always count on, this is how much for property tax, this is how much for miscellaneous revenue, and that income tax, that certified shares is in that miscellaneous revenue. We need to kind of estimate what that difference might be some way, so that we'll know what our revenue is.
In the long-term financial plan, we've already taken a stab at it. So we've got some estimates, and we'll be addressing that as we go forward with the 26 budget and the 26 miscellaneous revenues.
Right.
Yep.
So do you think it makes sense just look at those 4 highest ones that where we are right now? If you look at the distribution, it's...
We have 6 different lists. One of them is ours, correctional facility.
The only one you want to look at right now is the certified chair one.
Well, is what we call old Cadget, which is 0.94. So yes, we will look at that. That's the one we've already preliminary looked at.
Okay. All right. So what else do we have in 7B?
Nothing at this time.
Anything over? Okay. So, we have one more thing on the,
You can go ahead and discuss.
I think number 8 will be fairly easy.
okay, well, I think there needs to be a health break here. I don't know if everybody needs a health
Okay.
break. Do we want to recess for 10 minutes or?
5, 10 minutes, sure, we can, and then we can probably hit this one pretty quick.
Yeah, we'll
2
come right,
minutes,
we'll
whatever.
come right back and get right at the last thing. Okay, so I think we're ready to call this back to order. Okay, so we have number 8 on the agenda here to complete, and the title is Jail Financing. I'm sure that someone here attending today knows what we're talking about.
Yep, Jeff's going to take the lead first.
Thank you.
I will take the lead. As we all know, Senate Bill 1
Yeah.
created problems, right? And I think at this point, I talked with the bond counsel this morning. We think that unless there is a legislative change, it is likely that we would not be able to issue bonds until 2028, which would put the project in a couple-year delay. And so we've been talking about, what kinds of legislative changes we should be looking at and starting those conversations. And so I guess, Greg, do you want to kind of walk us through those?
So you have a piece of paper in front of you that shows
Yes.
the amortization schedule of what was estimated at this point in time, the $225 million number.
Yeah.
So, we just use that as a number. So that would require $17.9 million of LIT to support it. Right now, that would be over the Senate Bill 1 cap of 25% of your lit cannot be obligated to debt service. So that number would be obviously under this. So
At 25%, even though that's not what we got?
that's the way we understand it.
The total lit received by the county, but it includes all the different lit sources, right? So it would include edit lit as well as public safety lit and every lit source, but that's all received by the county, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's not my question, I'm sorry. Okay, that 25%, I think was tied to the economic development. That's what we were talking about, using it for it. But we only get a portion of that. So are they talking about 25% of the entire economic development revenue, including the cities?
It doesn't matter, really. The way we're doing the calculation at this point in time, if the county is receiving 42 million in total lit, the 25% I mentioned has nothing to do with seed at 25%. Total lit 40 million, you cannot use more than 25% of that 40 million for any debt right now in 25, 26, and 27. Period.
That's not what I thought.
Special law, special sentence. Okay, so given that, then we cannot, we're in a pause period. Jeff corrected me when I said we're stopped. No, we're in a pause period. So we will not be able to do it, as we said, using the jail correctional facility and seed it. So at this point in time, we've got to come up with an option. And the options are a legislative fix. Option 1, you go to the legislature and ask for a special lit to pay this bond of 17.9 annually, and that be granted sometime next year by the state. It would be what we would consider Title VII, and there's about 15 of them that are out there that are specifically done that way and are still in existence as we understand it and not being eliminated.
So those are happening right now?
So no, we would ask during the next section of the
Right.
legislature,
Right.
Monroe County would like to be added to Title VII, a special lit dedicated only for this.
Right, but I thought you said there was something about counties were already doing that.
I'm sorry, there are about 17 that already have
That's
special
what I was
lits
talking
like
about.
that. Yes.
Have a special lit.
Right.
Right, so this would be a new revised special lit, right? So, and so that's option one. Option two that I discussed specifically with Representative Thompson, because Jeff wrote up the paragraph, and I shared it with him, is that what we do is have a technical correction in next year's legislature that says the 25% maximum would not apply to a county that has a
Agreed order.
agreed order.
As a what?
Agreed order for, our current jail is under an agreed order with the
Okay.
Indiana Civil Liberties Union.
Yes, that's the order you're talking about.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we would ask for a special exception to the 25% cap. Again, nothing to do with edit, nothing to do with any of that. It's the artificial cap that was put into place for these years. And I would also like to ask for a bond up to 25 years, okay? That would be what I consider a good option. Representative Thompson heard me, said it might be a possibility, didn't say yes or no. I then also told him that we would want to, and we've discussed this with Jeff and bond counsel, we would also want to get your legislators backing this plan if we want either plan, either one or two, if we want to do it. We also would, a option number 3, I'm not trying to muddy the water with this, and I might still just make it option 2. The 25-year backup with property taxes, eliminate the 25% cap, and then also, if we don't get the special legislation under option 1, we also eliminate the fact that if you have a debt outstanding payable by lit, you don't annually renew that. Because everybody, I've seen people miss publications, something happened, and I don't want a bond default, and I don't want the Standard & Poor's to come back and say, well, what if there's a taxpayer revolt and you don't get that lit approved? That's a real possibility. So we need a legislative fix. Otherwise, we cannot move off the pause period. The team believes that we need to make a recommendation. So we want you to think about this. We're asking for no movement on this, but we're giving you the update. You're in a pause until we get a legislative fix at this point. Did I say that correctly, Jeff?
I think you said that correctly.
Questions?
I understand, I think.
We're working really hard, and our team at FSG is coming up with these suggestions or this, because not only, and by the way, next week, I'm trying to do a $50 million bond for a road project with Hendricks County, and we're going to have Representative Thompson there, and we're going to address that 25% cap and the annual amount, the annual revisiting that lit rate when it's dedicated to a bond is going to be a ratings issue.
This seems to me like a lot of these are unintended consequences.
Yes, ma'am.
That's how I would
Yes.
phrase it.
So if it is included with a special purpose, that sets outside the dollar amount, the person has, it sets completely aside from the other lit distributions and
Absolutely.
rules and so forth.
Yep.
And since we already have one special purpose, you're saying they would try to incorporate that?
Oh, no. I'm not incorporating anything. All I'm saying is just give me the right to levy a lit for the next 25 years to pay this bond off and have it dedicated to this bond and nothing else.
Okay, so it would be a second special purpose.
Yes, ma'am. So think about it.
Which one do you think will be the most difficult to get through?
I have no idea. I will tell you over the next week or two as I address option 2 with specific issues we have with specific counties, maybe the garage door gets a little bit opened. Right now, there's not a crack in either of them.
It would seem to me it might be better if you would tie it to like something major, which would include courthouses or something of the sort. That way you'll get more votes for it, because if you tie it just to jails, you won't have as many people there that might support it legislative-wise.
Councilmember Hawk, I'm the financial guy. I'll leave that up to your lobbyist in your legal. And, but I do know, I work in the trenches with representatives and senators on specifically problems, specific dilemmas, and, they were not, as you said it very well. It's an unintentional
Unintended consequence.
Thank
yes.
you.
Mhm.
And here we are. And that's why we knocked on his door, and we want to knock on others' doors.
How many, do you know how many counties are under the ACLU legislation problem?
No, ma'am. I
What?
have no idea.
See,
We don't know a total, we think there's at least one other, but they are further along, I think, in their process.
Oh, okay, under that type of ACLU. So there is one county that's under a agreed order and a consent decree and must do the project. And so, but if you're under those situations, then there's a whole nother set of rules. You're basically able to do, you can even do a general obligation bond with no remonstrance. So, but we're not at that level according to your attorney. So one's in a farther level, we're in the mid-level. I don't believe there's anybody else in the mid-level that I know of. That's it.
Anything else from anyone else over there? Okay. Councilor Hawk?
so what, how far behind, maybe this is a question of, how far behind the schedule of where we thought we would be will this put us?
I think if everything goes ideally and we get a legislative change and we get it done by March, I think the bonding process is typically 3 months. So we were originally planning on breaking ground in June. So if we did March, April, May, June, we could probably time it so that we'd get going in July or August. So a couple months, if all goes well.
Bond counsel said they could work up a schedule, but at this point in time, it's too early to work up a schedule. Again, we would like direction from the county as a whole on what they would like the team to go after.
As from the way I read the legislation, it said that we couldn't do any more than 25% for a debt, didn't say for jail, for a debt. And that if we didn't put in a lit, that they would put the lit in for us just enough to cover that debt. But is this like that's a part of the Senate Bill 1 and this isn't?
So I'm totally familiar with what you said because Jeff and I also had, Representative Thompson and I also had this discussion. And the key is, yes, if you have a jail bond right now that's covered by lit, the state does not mean to bankrupt those. That lit will be imposed to pay that debt in the event you don't. And, you know, your funds could be intercepted to do that. So, you know, but those are pre-existing. We do not have any of those.
So
Here in Monroe County.
you can't, our present income from the economic development and the jail is not enough to cover the bond.
No, ma'am,
That would mean no increase to the taxpayer.
So we ran those numbers quite a while ago, and I don't
It was running short, but
It was close.
Yeah.
I guess.
Not at the 225.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it was running close, but it would not require an increase in the tax base because that's already, that tax is already there. It's already.
Correct. I don't think under any scenario we've talked about, I don't think we're trying to look at increasing any income tax beyond what is currently in place. Now, the state is kind of making us have to rethink that, but I think for the jail, I think we've always wanted to keep the project budget in line with what the income tax from the edit and the correctionals tax would create, plus what cash on hand we had, namely the ban we issued for the purchase of the property. So I think that was always the funding mechanisms we looked at in order to do this project. And so that's kind of been how we've internally have looked at, hey, what's the upper limit of the budget going to be? Now the state's done some things that we haven't really known how to react to, so we've kind of kept that original spirit in place. But
I'm just saying that because if we did a special purpose and had that completely set aside from our other revenue, we're really doing a double dip from what we had told the taxpayer was going to be. We had told the taxpayer as we were moving along, we were going to pay for the jail with the economic development tax, but we could only use a portion of each because we had to leave some for,
Well, so I don't think, yeah, Jeff, we talked about under option one, there could be an increase and a delete in the income tax offsetting. And remember, anything we would even get authorization for next year would have to be enacted next year, wouldn't be in place for more than, or before 27 anyways, when we're starting to get ready to go into 28 with our Monroe counties new, what do we want as a new tax rate for LIT? 1.2 or lower?
I'm just trying to figure out a way to make sure that in order to make this thing move forward, we're not setting up a situation where literally going to be putting in place a brand new tax on top of the other 1.2 that we're counting on getting, and then we're going to have this on top of that. This is just going to be a lot more than what had been originally discussed.
And my mind jumped when you were speaking to if we have a lit rate, an edit rate in place and a correctional tax in place, and then we got this new legislation, there may be a way to explore how the new legislation would utilize the edit and the correctional tax first, and then anything in addition to those, which, would hopefully be nothing, would then be made. That's where that tax would pick up, and it would remain in place past the 2027, 2028 transition.
So until that's even written, this is a discussion point.
Hypothetical.
Yeah.
And so what would be the timeline if you were asking for this legislative fix? What timeline would that go
Well,
under?
next spring.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, thank you.
Next session,
Next session, yes.
earlier the better.
Yes,
Short session, so I believe they go in January and come back out
usually
3 months
March-ish,
later.
right, yeah. Okay. Hulk, are you good
And,
there?
and the same way with option 2 if there was a fix.
Yes, I get the fixed timeline.
Yeah.
Any more from Counselor Hawk?
I appreciate it. I'm not going to recommend anything.
Right, I don't think we're recommending anything, is from what I can tell.
I mean, do you have this all memorized?
I don't have it memorized.
Oh, we're not asking for a recommendation.
Yeah, okay.
I think we just say we will take this under consideration.
Yes, under advisement.
Under
Okay,
advisement.
so I think that's the last thing on the agenda I see. So I believe we'll call this meeting a done deal, right? We're going to adjourn.